right after this meeting, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Nope, no problem.
All right, we will call the August 16th Crow Wing County
Look what I got.
Committee of the Whole
No,
meeting
I
to
can't
order.
put that all up there.
First item on our agenda is update mental health services. Tammy and Nathan. Good morning.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Tammy Lewick, Adult Services Manager for Community Services.
Nathan Bertram, Adult Services Supervisor for Community Services.
So I think we'll start first with just some of our data. And so it's up on the board, or up on their PowerPoint there. So as you can see, so this is our commitments. Nathan, do you want to just explain what a commitment is for our?
Our commitments are done through the court, so when somebody is kind of found in need, usually at a hospital, the doctor there writes an examiner's statement in support of commitment. That comes to our team, which then kind of triggers the pre-screening team to evaluate and interview that person. We interview them, witnesses, we collect the medical records, then we meet as a group to kind of determine whether there's enough to put a petition forward. And that then goes to the attorney's office for them to review and have a decision as well on their end on the legal side. And that is how we move into some of these numbers. And I would just preface that, I guess, we have 190 cases on the adult mental health team. Probably about 60 to 75% of them at any given moment are commitment related. So that kind of sets the numbers up a little bit for you.
So I think the thing we wanted to just kind of point out this morning is, that we typically are working with really these high-end complex cases that are commitment cases. Sometimes we do have people that do things voluntarily, so we might screen them and then they agree to do their services voluntarily, which then results in a stay. So when you look at those numbers up there, or what we call diversion, so you can see that to date, we have 60 pre-screenings that we've been requested to do. So we are trending higher than last year, but if you go back looking at 2018, 2019, it still looks like we're trending higher, but yet in 2018 we were at 117 for the year, 2019 111. And so this year to date, 60. The diversions are those ones that we said that we screen, but then we potentially go down a voluntary route, and so we're not recommending commitment. And so 38 have been recommended. And then you can scroll down, Therese. There's questions, just let me know along the way.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What's the screening entail? Is it just a sit down and ask questions and make a determination?
Yeah, I can. So that's a part of it, yes. I mean, back when I started in 2012, we did all these individually face-to-face. We kind of drove all over the state wherever anyone was hospitalized and did exactly that, sat down, interviewed them. Kind of with moving to technology and everything else, a lot of them are done either via phone or video now. And so yes, we try to meet with everyone individually, talk to them. We have kind of a series of questions we ask to kind of evaluate what their willingness to engage with us or do things voluntarily is. They do have the right to refuse to meet with us. And then we go based off of whatever medical records and witness records we can gather.
Wouldn't it be hard to do it over the phone? I mean, I would think you'd have to be kind of like sitting there looking at the person.
Yeah, it is a little tricky over the phone, and I do not prefer that, but sometimes, we have the technology, doesn't mean that the hospital always has it. That and some individuals just aren't stable enough. They'll take the iPad and toss it across the room, and so, there's some cost things there as well, so. But we do our best to try to interview everyone and try to engage them to kind of see where they're at.
We can continue to go down. This just kind of speaks to like our commitments versus our diversions, and our goal is to be, we have a goal of trying to really work to engage people so that they do things voluntarily. Obviously, that doesn't always work. Sometimes people are really ill and refuse to even meet with us. So our goal is 45% for commitment and 55% for those that are diverted. And you can see this year, we're not doing as well as we would like. 63 have resulted in commitments and 37% diverted. And then the other number that we just want to have you be mindful of is these Rule 20s. So you've been hearing a lot about competency restoration potentially. If you were watching and following legislation, there's new legislation that was passed, and we'll be watching that to look at how competency restoration will be done in the future. But just to see those numbers, you can see in 2021, that number doubled, and we're on track for that number to be even larger this year. So 56, so we're at 28, so 56 is what we're projecting. Is that correct?
Yep, that would be correct.
We're at 28 to date. All right, we can switch to our state facility handout unless there's questions about our numbers with that. So typically we come and we share with you our state facility costs because this has been very impactful to our county levy. And for the last couple of years now, we've been doing much better in this area. This is the cost of care for those that are in the AMRTC after 30 days, those under commitment that no longer meet medical criteria, either at the Anoka Regional Medical Treatment Center or at one of our community behavioral health hospitals, and they're deemed do not meet criteria. Our mentally ill and dangerous, those individuals that are committed mentally ill and dangerous and they are housed at St. Peter, and then are sexually dangerous. I just gave a little rundown there of those costs. There is a little bit of a shift in cost starting July 1st. As you can see there, counties are responsible for 100% of the daily cost when an individual no longer meets medical criteria in an inpatient hospital setting. So you can see our state facility costs were running at $235,187 for the year, but then you do see the breakdown between cost of care. We've had no one hit that cost of care over 30 days. The sexually dangerous, we have 13 individuals currently at St. Peter and the cost for that. Our mentally ill and dangerous, we have 3 individuals currently committed to St. Peter and the cost for that. And then our does not meet criteria, we've had 3 individuals that have met that and at a cost of $21,372.
So Tammy, just real quick on those numbers represent only the first half of this year, correct?
First half of this year.
So you'd have to potentially double that if we end up with a full year.
Yep. So our annual budget for this area, because this can, with one person, can quickly add up if we run into a person that we can't, that we're having difficulty moving. So our annual budget for this area is $687,000. We're at 34% of budget. Under the state facility cost comparison, you can see years 2020, 2021, and then just remember 2022 is just the first half to kind of see how we've trended. It looks like our sexually dangerous is going to be a little higher this year, and that's partly just because of increasing costs. Our mentally ill and dangerous, we actually had an individual that was discharged to the community, and so that's running a little bit lower, but we have 2 individuals right now that potentially are maybe going to be returning, that are in the community, returning back to St. Peter.
Tammy, how much does it cost per day?
I don't have for the sexually dangerous or for the mentally ill and dangerous. It's 10% of the full cost. I would have to follow up and get you that exact number. It's lower than the number of the DNMC days at the AMRTC and at the CBHH. I want to say it's right around $900 a day. No, it's got to even be lower than that, sorry, because it ends up being, I will get it to you. I don't want to guess and be wrong, so.
That Is that levy dollars that we have to pay?
What's that?
Is that levy dollars then?
Yes, this all is levy dollars.
So people's property taxes, so $900 a day.
Sorry, and for I misspoke. That is not the cost for our sexually dangerous or our mentally ill and dangerous. It's only 10% of potentially, so it's probably more like $170. And like I said, I would like to get you that true number so that I'm not guessing. But when somebody doesn't meet criteria, we are charged that 100%. And so
I
that's
thought we had a
that.
discussion before about Anoka, and it was like a huge amount every day, and we were trying to come up with I don't know, what kind of a plan would you call it, to get them out of there so that we weren't continually having to pay for that. And that
Yeah.
was a huge amount.
Yeah, that's the 1710 at Anoka.
A day?
And then a day, and at the CBHH, 1,680. And that's why one person for potentially just a few days can really impact our budget.
How can it be that much? That doesn't make any sense.
It's the full cost for their stay at that facility. And I would just, want to give credit to our mental health team. Nathan meets with his team weekly to review the commitment cases that we have, people that are potentially under commitment, and then those that are out in other hospitals that are, or even in the jail, which we're going to talk about here shortly, awaiting state facility beds. I looked yesterday, they have their meetings on Monday, and I looked at that yesterday, and they review about 25 to 30 individuals every week that are in some sort of, I think we had about 10 specifically in a state facility, but then another 20 that are either in jail or in a hospital, community hospital setting. And then I would also give credit to our regional transition specialist, which is that position that we fund through our adult mental health initiative at Sourcewell. Mike Willie, he looks at all of our commitment cases across the region, and he works on making sure that we're doing everything we can to get placements arranged so that when people are no longer needing to be in the hospital, that we have good plans in place and have placement options available for them.
One quick question, Tammy, the sexually dangerous ones, define what that is. Is that the civil committed ones?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's, the DOC ones aren't counted in that. That's all the
Okay.
civil committed ones.
So
and
that's
they-
the ones at Moose Lake and St. Peter, the
Correct.
campuses there. And I know their per diem runs well over $200 a day for those individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, you're correct. And I will follow up with that number so you know what those two, because they're both different, so, but 10% of cost. Any questions just in regards to those items? So we're kind of running a little bit shorter on time, but what our hope had been today was that we wanted to bring you a couple of client stories, consumer stories, just to kind of help show kind of how individuals kind of go through this process. I didn't include this in our packet, so it's not on the PowerPoint, but we're just going to speak first to Sydney. So Sydney's journey. Sydney is a young adult attending college, and she was home on break. She was with a friend when she became upset. She appeared very manic, and she called the police. Upon police arrival, she was agitated and became aggressive. She needed to be restrained, and she was taken into custody. They did release her from the jail, and she was taken to a hospital where she was placed on a hold. The hospital called the county requesting a pre-screening for commitment, which Nathan kind of spoke about earlier. So that's that request for us to screen an individual for danger to self or others. And a doctor at the hospital makes that examination report or request to us. Sydney had her preliminary hearing, so we recommended, and she was ordered to remain in the hospital. The community hospital released her to the community prior to her commitment hearing, which is not common, but we are seeing more of this from our hospitals when they feel somebody maybe is stabilized and or they sometimes it's maybe, I don't want to say it's because they don't want to hold them, but sometimes it's that they do street people on occasion. So Sydney doesn't continue her mental health services or her medication. She quickly declines, and she has a suicide attempt within 7 days of her release from hospital. Sydney's brought to the hospital. She receives inpatient mental health care at the hospital for 23 days. She's released from the hospital with ACT services, which is one of our community transition programs that works with individuals out in the community. They provide at least 2 to 3 visits a week with the individual, so it's high intensity. Within 5 days, she's brought back to the hospital with manic episode. While at the emergency department, Sydney assaults a hospital staff and is brought to jail. While at jail, she stabilizes and moves to a state facility 12 days later. They adjust her medications, and she's discharged 9 days later. Sydney returns to the community with county case management, ACT services, and medication management. Sydney is currently stable and living in the community.
Can I ask a question on that? So before that, Sydney was fine, everything was fine? Or it just happened like that?
Go ahead.
She had some past case history and was committed one other time prior to that. And so, I mean, this kind of speaks to the cyclic nature of mental health and some of the medical needs that we have in our community. I mean, you can be well for a long time and stable on diabetes meds or mental health meds, but eventually those meds have to be increased, adjusted, tweaked to maintain your functioning. And so, in this case, whether she stopped taking her meds or the meds just weren't working anymore, I'm not really sure of.
But it can happen like that, can it? Because when I was in the legislature, somebody in my district invited me to their house, and they said their son was like in high school and he was a super athlete, and you know, when everything was perfect, he was getting ready to go to college, and his dad said it was like a light switch went off, and their son just left, and they never saw him for 10 years. They didn't know if he was dead or alive, and one Christmas, about 10 years later, he showed up at their door and spent 3 days there and left again. They just don't know where he's at, what he's doing. Just, I don't know, it's kind of really a sad story.
Right.
Yeah, and I think those are the sad stories, and when we're trying to kind of engage people and get them connected, that's what we're working on, so those sort of things don't happen, and unfortunately, it still does happen occasionally.
I'll continue if it's all right?
Yep.
Okay. So Jack's journey, and I should just mention, I mean, we have changed names and done some adjustments to our stories, of course, to protect people. Jack is a young adult. Jack assaulted a neighbor for no apparent reason. Jack was charged with assault and brought to the jail. Jack was not currently open with us, yet had some past history with our agency. Upon intake and assessment at the jail, it appeared Jack was delusional and having hallucinations. Jack was placed on a mental health watch. Staff requested a pre-screening for commitment, as there were concerns for danger to self or others. Pre-screening was completed. Jack went to court and was released from his charges. Sheriff's office transported him to the hospital for a mental health evaluation, and he was placed on a hold. After 1 day at the emergency department awaiting a mental health bed, Jack became aggressive with the emergency department staff and was arrested and brought back to jail. He was placed back on a mental health watch as there were continued concerns for his mental health. Our comprehensive reentry social worker informed the court of the pending commitment case. This resulted in the judge holding the individual in jail on conditions or until a mental health bed could become available. This allowed for him to be held while commitment proceedings occurred. Commitment hearings took place, and Jack is placed at a community behavioral health hospital. This happens 29 days after Jack's initial arrest. Jack receives treatment for 2.5 months in an acute setting, so in an inpatient psychiatric unit, and is provisionally discharged to an intensive residential treatment service. They're called IRTs. Sometimes you hear of it being referenced as that. He was there for approximately 3 months. Jack returned home after his treatment. Jack remains at home. He's taking his medications. He has a county adult mental health case manager, and he works with the ACT team. And I think the piece here I want to just kind of point out is just with both Sydney and Jack's story, you can see that many times they are taken into custody and arrested, and many times sit in jail as things are as we're trying to get people into inpatient or get them the mental health services they need. So I'm just wanting to make that be a piece of the story, because that happens frequently. And also speaks to it's how helpful it has been for us to have our social workers in the jail and working to coordinate services for people.
Can I ask another question? So when somebody's having something like that happen, does the county attorney say, I'm not going to file any charges? Because it just seems to me that would just be more traumatic or for them, and it really isn't their doing. I mean, they're having an...
Yeah, that does happen. I mean, we coordinate with attorneys and are in discussion with them on kind of what makes sense, if we can go the commitment route, if we have enough to kind of look at going that route, and whether the charges should be suspended, continued. I mean, there's a whole variation of things on the legal side that they kind of do. But yeah, we do try to look at that if we can.
We should also mention, we also received the ARPA funding for our mental health liaison social worker with law enforcement, and that's also in an effort to try to reduce individuals, divert them completely from going to the jail, so that maybe we can get them to a hospital rather than jail. And we just had an incident a couple weeks ago here now where we were able to do that. There could have been a potential, the person did assault a family member, and the individual was brought to the hospital, and we were working with that person and able to get him stabilized, and rather than even coming into the hospital. Into the jail, sorry.
So Tammy, let me ask a question. If they're not committed, we can't force medications on them, correct?
Correct.
So in the jail,
They're not, yeah.
they're not necessarily being provided with the medications that might stabilize them, and yet you say they are stabilized. How do they achieve that?
They are offered medications in the jail, and I think that's kind of the hard part. I mean, some of that goes back to their cost out of pocket then. And there's just some medications that the jail can't offer. But if nursing at the jail has their medical history and knows what meds they're on, they do try to provide those meds, and that's why we do see sometimes people stabilize in the jail, because they realize, like, ooh, and they start taking their meds, and they stabilize, and then we work with them voluntarily, hopefully, when they get out.
So would there have to be a prescription prior to them entering the jail that the nursing staff would offer those medications? And if there isn't,
Easier
then
and a
there
little
is no
quicker.
route to
quicker.
offer medications to them, correct?
No, they can, there's a doctor that sees those individuals. It's
There
just
is.
a longer process. Like, instead of maybe starting meds on day 2 or day 3 of being in the jail, if it's gonna go through the jail service, you might be looking at a week to 10 days, just because they gotta meet with the doctor, they gotta talk, they gotta get it prescribed.
yeah.
So it's just a little bit longer process, and I think Heath or Troy could probably speak to a little bit better on kind of how long that length of time is.
Am I wrong in thinking that a GP, and I'm not sure what the doctor's title is over there at the jail, can't prescribe the psychotropic drugs that might be needed to stabilize a person? Or if they can, it's a very short period of time with which they do it, because they have to be seen by a psychiatrist at some point to get the diagnosis correct and the medications correct. Correct?
Yeah, I think they can prescribe pretty much anything, but jail policy, they stay away from any narcotics and kind of some of those habit-forming ones. And then I think the other piece of that is they can't force anything in the jail like they can at a CBHH or a community hospital. They can't do the Jarvis hearing and force the medication. So at the jail, if individual is manic or psychotic and they're not wanting the pills, there's no way to make them take those pills. They might be offered, but if they decline, and they continue to cycle downward, unfortunately.
We met with the jail and MEND and Essentia. We're working on some things with that. We met with them yesterday, and they did indicate that if you come in and if you're on a medication, if you're on a current prescription, they can get that more readily for you. And then, as Nathan mentioned, that longer period of time, that 7 to 10 days, though, if you are not on any medication and you need to be seen by their mental health staff.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, we just talked about the quick turnaround. Some individuals leave jail really quickly, so they don't even get an opportunity to be seen. And so they continue to go without medications. And so that was some of the pieces that we're trying to work on. Can we set up appointments? Can we help people get in so that maybe if they need to be on medications, we can get them seen by primary, or maybe a mental health appointment as well, if that's what's needed.
Yeah, I think Troy reference, the average jail stay was a little over 3 days, I think, yesterday. So, I mean, sometimes people aren't seen by medical at all in the jail in that amount of time, so.
I was only trying to point out how difficult some of these cases are, and both for the jailers over there and for the individual who is not stabilized at that point, so.
The jail's
for the
very
social worker.
restricted in what they can do.
Right.
And of course, you're not receiving the type of treatment you would receive if you were in a hospital or an inpatient psych unit, if that's really what you're needing.
Right, okay.
The final story that I brought was Jillian's journey. Jillian is in her mid-20s. She was actively using. She became pregnant and was struggling with her use. She was using fentanyl and THC. The county received a report for prenatal exposure, and this is another area where we, through the statute, that we're required to do a pre-screening when we have somebody that is using chronic use. It's considered, danger to self and other, or to baby, really. And so that comes to our pre-screening team. At the county, we pre-screen for prenatal exposures. Our pre-screening team for prenatal exposures is made up of our lead screener, and we also, a number of years ago, we added a public health nurse to that screening. So we go out together with a public health nurse and the lead screener. Jillian initially agreed to services voluntarily. She went to treatment voluntarily, yet struggled to stay in the program and left. She re-entered treatment a couple of more times voluntarily, yet continued to leave and use. She also had a positive drug test while she was in treatment. The county pursued commitment through the court as Jillian was having a difficult time staying in treatment and continued to use during her pregnancy. Jillian was placed at a community addiction recovery enterprise, which is considered a care treatment facility, a state facility. This is a locked setting. Jillian remained at care until the baby was born. The baby was born healthy and monitored for withdrawals. Child Protection did place the baby with a relative as Jillian was still in treatment. After baby's birth and completion of inpatient treatment program, Jillian went to a step-down program in the community. She relapsed again. She then went to a sober home and attended a high-intensity outpatient treatment program. Jillian recently moved in with family and has started a lower-intensity outpatient program. She's been sober for 2 months and has moved to unsupervised visits with her baby. So that was another story that we just wanted to share. Not everybody knows that we do prenatal exposure pre-screenings, and we try to work with individuals, again, to engage them in voluntary services. It doesn't always remain voluntary, and sometimes we have to do the involuntary route. And so we wanted to speak to this. We also, I think, Jillian's story, the thing that I think of is just how hard recovery is, and going to treatment is not, it's a process, and it doesn't happen in 30 days. As in Jillian's case, she really struggled to stay in treatment and left, and that also, that happens. And we have to continue to work with these individuals and try to help them, because it's not that they don't want the help, they don't want to get better. It's addiction, and it takes some time. And so, Jillian continued forth. And she was able, like I said, now to be in an outpatient, lower intensity outpatient program, and has been sober for 2 months. Any questions about anything we presented?
Very challenging mission that you folks have over there. I'll just say that. It's, you win one day and you lose the next day. So, but thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Next up is Master Gardener update.
That'd be great. Well, thank you very much for having us here today to give a update from the County Extension Office. We've noticed over the last couple of years an uptick in people, county residents, calling us for questions on gardening, insects, maybe weeds, could be canning, those types of topics. And all of that translates into learning and people wanting to learn more. So U of M Extension has programs where people can volunteer, they learn, and then they share their information that they're learning. Some of those programs could be Master Naturalist. It could be the Aquatic Invasive Species First Detector Program. But today I have people with me from the County Extension Office who are working in the Master Gardener program. So I have volunteers here today they've gone through the core course. So to become a Master Gardener, you need to go through learning. It's an educational opportunity of about 40 hours of classroom type instruction, and then you agree to do some volunteering. They are sharing what they're learning in the community. Might be in a booth that might be at the county fair. It might be answering a question from someone. It could be arranging for an educational opportunity. And these Master Gardeners in Crow Wing County are doing a stellar job, and I just want to invite them up. So Dan and Kathy Lee and Brittany Dan and Jennifer Lee. I know a Dan and Kathy Lee as well. My apologies. And then Brittany Georgia. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. Well, thank you for letting us come and share our experiences for the last year. As you know, the Master Gardener is a service organization dedicated to our residents within Crow Wing County. And this year, next slide. Oh, excuse me. We expanded the program and we added more projects. And the components include the bedding plant project, the patio container garden project, back again, Gardening 101 for youth and Gardening 101 for adults, and then the Giving Garden. The bedding project was something that was part of a two-step. We had a group of Master Gardeners who grew seeds and grew them into bedding plants that could then be used for programs, the following programs. And as you can see on the left, those were lettuce bowls. And on the right, you can see some of our volunteers on a very windy and rainy day planting about 170 different pots that were then going to be dedicated or given to the patio gardens. So 172 patio gardens, along with educational materials, were distributed to various Crow Wing County organizations, including the VA, Garrison Lions Club, CRMC, Senior Living in Crosby, Sharing Bread Kitchen for their clients, Home Instead, again, for their clients, Cuyuna Social Services, Crow Wing County WIC, and Crow Wing County Social and Community Service, and the Pequot Lakes Food Shelf. There is a quick story. One of the volunteers who came to pick up their number of gardens told me about the excitement that one of their clients had of receiving the patio garden last year. She had given them a pepper plant and a tomato plant. And the resident was so excited because the organization actually explained how to make their own fresh salsa. And nobody had taken the time to do that. These are just the small things that we were able to do. The remaining, there were about 40 bedding plants that were donated also to Mid-Minnesota Women's Center and both Port Home locations. So then the container gardens were really distributed. As you can see, we have Crow Wing County Social Services again. Those went to their clients. Garrison Lines, we are doing what we have been tasked to do. We are reaching across the county. Garrison Lines and the Veterans Administration. And as you can see, Cuyuna Medical Center had us on a post. We have Home Instead, and then the Sharing Bread Kitchen, again, had a post.
So, as Jennifer alluded to, we're back to doing in-person education at the Northland Arboretum for children and adults. And with regard to children, we actually are back up to 14 students, ages of 8 to 15 years old, Each one of those students comes in for about a half an hour of in-person instruction in the Arboretum, and then we go out to the gardens and they actually have planted their own gardens. The instructions do a lot of things. They build a team environment, they give them confidence in gardening skills, teach them a little bit about the importance of agriculture in our society. These students walk away knowing that not all food comes from the grocery store, that it can come from their own backyard garden. They also are taught little skills like they dyed wool using natural dyes from plant material as an exercise. And it's that kind of inquisitive education for the children that's really gotten them enthused in gardening skills. Then we have adults, and we've got 17 students this year, ages 16 to somewhere over 80. We're not exactly sure how to ask that question, so we're not going to ask that question. They're novices to experts. We've got several of them that are already thinking about maybe joining the Master Gardener program because they're enjoying it so much this year. And we have 3 veterans that are gardening with us. And you'll see that some of the posts that we're getting from them throughout the education classes. We also, over the last few years, have had a Giving Garden project out at the Arboretum. And when we couldn't use the gardens for instruction, we grew vegetables that were donated to the local food shelves. So for example, this last year, we donated over 3,000 pounds of food to the food shelves across Crow Wing County. Right now, we're doing Giving Gardens at the Arboretum. We've expanded to a small one at the Ideal Corners area. We've got gardeners who are doing personal ones as well. And these donations go to the Salvation Army, Sharing Bread Soup Kitchen, CWC WIC, CWC Social Services, Mid-Minnesota Women's Shelter is a big recipient, as well as Pequot, Garrison, and Cross Lake food shelves. So we heard you the last time we were here about spreading the wealth of what we're doing across the county. And so this map shows 2 things. First, we have volunteers in every one of your districts across the county. And that wouldn't have happened without the support that we have from you. And the second is we are also supplying services throughout the county. Every one of the districts has either a food shelf or a community garden or some kind of an educational component happening in all of those districts across the county. This kind of activity is a result of 2 things. One, the wonderful facility we have out at the Northland Arboretum that allows us to have a home base where we can get together and we can plan and do some of these things. And the second is the support that you, the county commissioners, have given us by having Brittany, who's going to speak next, as coordinator for our entire program. So I just want to say thank you for what you've enabled us to be able to do. Brittany.
All right, thanks, Dan, and thanks, commissioners, for having me here today. Yeah, as Dan said, you know, your investment in me has enabled us to do a lot of things. And these couple of facts outline how our program is growing. So it's really a win-win. You know, our volunteers are getting education, learning about things that they're interested in, and choosing projects that they feel are impactful in their, you know, home base. And I hope to keep the volunteers we have engaged and grow our program with more interns. All of our volunteers are committed through the University of Minnesota Extension guidelines to a minimum of 20 hours of volunteer service a year. The interns have to do 50, but as you can see on the year-to-date hours, or the yearly total hours of volunteer service, most do much more, on average of 60 per volunteer. And those numbers show, like 2020 was COVID, so it was a a hard year for us to find volunteer activities, but we still, Dan and Jennifer got the Giving Gardens off the ground, and we still continue to educating residents and by moving to Zoom. And that number is from the independent sector of the value of a volunteer hour. So that shows the value that we bring to your county. And 2022, of course, the year's not over, but we're already at 2,500 hours of volunteer service that our volunteers have logged in the state database. And then Dan and Jennifer really highlighted the Community Giving Project, and that is their baby, and that they lead that project. But as the map illustrated, we do a lot of other projects. So this is just a few of our ongoing outreach projects. We, as Dan mentioned, we have a strong partnership with the Northland Arboretum. We're countywide, but we do volunteer service at the Northland Arboretum. So we're working on a few gardens there, getting them really shining, including the rain garden. And when we do work in a community garden, we're not just trying to make it look pretty, we are trying to make it educational for the people that visit it. So the rain garden at the Northland Arboretum has, plants labeled so people can visit it and learn more about the type of garden that they could grow in their backyard, and really make it a educational experience for them. We're guiding youth at Port Group Homes, they're growing their own vegetables and flowers this year. They reached out to us last year and said, we have this garden space and we're failing at growing anything. We need somebody that knows what they're doing in here. So we were happy to make this partnership a reality this year. We were back at the county fair this year. We answered over 600 garden questions, which I think was pretty substantial. It's probably a drop in the bucket compared to the number of people Commissioner Barrows talked to and some of the other commissioners at the county fair, but it was really good to be there. We funded a grant at the Crosby Library, and they did landscape renovations. So we're a point of contact where anybody can reach out to us, and we can provide them guidance on what plants would do well and be of benefit to the landscape. Our library presentation series is continuing. It's still on Zoom. Last year we had over 1,000 people attend, so I consider that a big success. We are happy to partner with Crow Wing Soil and Water however we can. We helped at their tree sale distribution. We attended the Head Start gardening event that over 100 youth attended. We have a volunteer that leads gardening sessions at Woodland Good Sam in Brainerd, and we're still continuing our helpline and the Ask the Master Gardener column in the Brainerd Dispatch. This graphic I just wanted to share with you commissioners. It illustrates some of the projects we undertake. I know sometimes it's hard to understand, what does the Master Gardener Volunteer Program do? Are they just, a garden club, old ladies garden club, making things pretty? We're not that. We are educators, and we collaborate with organizations, and I think that this PowerPoint has really illustrated some of the work we do. But yeah, and then I hope you guys can come see in person. At the Northland Arb tomorrow, 11 to 1, we're having an open house where you can see the Giving Gardens. The kids will just be finishing up their class. Some of Dan and Jennifer's adults are going to be there. We've invited all of our stakeholders, all the mayors in all of Crow Wing County, and we'll have light refreshments, garden tours, so you can check out the other gardens we've been working on, and yeah, hope to see you there. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I might ask
any
couple
questions?
things. First of all, thank you for all you folks do for our communities across Crow Wing County. Will my friend Kevin be there tomorrow? Yes. Okay. Kevin is the gentleman in the picture that you saw with the long gray beard when they showed the adult program. He's a veteran. I met him 3 years ago when I was out at the Arboretum, and have continued a friendship with him. I see him parked outside of Caribou. He's always using their Wi-Fi, kind of in his truck all the time. But we've kind of struck up a casual friendship, and I always appreciate seeing him and talking with him. The other thing I wanted to ask you is when COVID hit, you did some online teaching and meetings for the Master Gardeners. Are you continuing to do that, or has that kind of fallen by the wayside?
So our Brainerd monthly educational presentations are still online. I've been working with Laurel at the Brainerd Library, and she feels like if it's working well, we're not going to change it. We still meet hybrid, and I feel like you know, we're working with the Arboretum. I think that Zoom and people learning things online is kind of here to stay. So we're going to do our best to continue our in-person work, but also make technology, you know, use it for the good of the community and reach as many people as we can, however we can. So
One more thing too. As far as the library presentations that Brittany alluded to, we started recording them, which was something that was not done in prior years. And so we have them on our website for a month until the next video drops. So if somebody can't attend, they can always go back and at their leisure be able to watch it. And it's really also brought in people who we didn't realize what it was going to do, and it's raised more visibility for us on that side too.
Good.
Can you share how many you're having view then at the time and maybe later?
yeah, I am able to see that. So it really varies depending upon the topic, but it's usually in the 20s of, you know, 20 people or so that view it after the fact.
Okay.
But it's fairly new, so who knows where it will go. Yeah.
Maybe 100 online?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the one I did was 110 or something like that. Zoom is back, and and here to stay. It's done a remarkable thing for us. We actually have more people who participate in our monthly meetings because we have a hybrid option. They don't have to drive from Crosby over here to participate in an hour-long meeting and have the half-hour drive back and forth. So it's a tool that we're using to advantage. The other thing is, as you mentioned, COVID did change our programs for quite a bit. It's still impacting us today because we've had 2 people in our adult class who have had COVID that haven't been able to come back to classes. One of them's actually in the hospital now. So it's still here, and we have to use the tools available like Zoom to continue doing the work we're doing.
Good.
Any other questions or suggestions?
Thank you.
Guys.
Great. I just wanted to thank Jennifer and Dan for being here and for your volunteering effort, because you do a lot, and so do the other volunteers in Master Gardeners in the Crow Wing County. So thank you all for letting us share our impact with the Master Gardener program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Northland Arboretum.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to speak today and provide an update on the Northland Arboretum. So last time I was in front of you, I believe I shared our newly approved strategic plan for the next 3 years. So I would like to provide some updates on that as well. So before we get started, I wanted to provide just a little bit of what you do for us, just as a little bit of background. So we do have 2 county-owned parcels. Those are the green 40 acres parcels shown in the map there. We have a 100-year lease, and we have about 70 years left on that lease. I just spoke with the Land Services Department, and they're confident that this partnership and agreement has been going well. Not many issues have come up, and whenever we have questions, it's been a great communication and reaction from the county. So thank you for allowing us to manage that land. I'm going to go back to the previous slide just for a second. So we also have a thriving partnership with the Crow Wing County Master Gardeners, as you know. So the presentation today from them also impacts us and the mission that we are trying to accomplish throughout the county as well. And the capacity that you guys give of Brittany and her role very much interacts with what we do and makes it a very seamless process for us. And then, of course, we have some increased awareness and support coming from you guys, so appreciate your support in attempting to get us designated through the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails. We are still working on that. There are some barriers that came up, and I've been working with Tim on maybe some solutions to that. And then the latest support that has been given from the county level is a group Arboretum membership program. So the Human Resources Department, Carrie over there with you guys, reached out to us and said, we want to provide a more wellness for our 500 county employees. So we worked with her and revamped our program a little bit, and we were able to give every single employee a free individual membership, and 125 of those county employees have taken advantage of that so far. About 25% of those employees that have signed up also one-upped their membership so that their families can get involved a little bit more in the outdoors and take advantage of that program. So thank you for that partnership. Next slide, please. And then some of the things that we provide the community in Crow Wing County. So we have 413 acres of beautiful green space right smack dab in the middle of the community. We're a central meeting space and a home base for a lot of community organizations, including the Crow Wing County Master Gardeners. And we promote tourism by providing year-round recreational opportunities and educational programming for the community and beyond. So having that amazing draw into the community, we now have a map in our hallway where people are pinning where they're coming from, and it's a great visual to see. Like, we have people from Vietnam that have visited the Northland Arboretum here in Brainerd. We have people visiting from New York and California. It's just amazing that we are that much of a draw, that people want to see the impact that we're providing to this community. So it's very cool to see. And then, of course, we are providing nature education to all, and we're the stewards of the old landfills. So the impact that we have for the community is great. Next slide. Just kind of a recap of our strategies from our strategic plan. We have strategies underneath each of our buckets here of conservation, education, recreation, marketing, membership, and so on. And I wanted to provide just kind of a visual of what we have done with those strategies here in the last year or so. Next slide. So our impact, you might think, well, the Northland Arboretum is just situated right in Brainerd-Baxter, and how do we impact beyond that? And that has been one of the challenges with COVID, but now we have some really great strategies and great plans going forward to reach beyond. And some of the things that we have accomplished here, so for District 1, we've provided field trips to students over in Garrison, and we have participants in our nature camp from that area as well. In District 2, we provided instruction to the Nisswa Nature Camp, which is through their Parks and Rec program. For District 3, we did a city park cleanup where I believe we got to 6 parks and did a cleanup in partnership with the city of Brainerd, and that was for our Earth Day kind of celebration. And then we also have an amazing partnership with the Brainerd Public Schools. We provide, the grounds provides great cross-country ski trails, as well as running, and then a place for them to do their meets. So we have about 2 cross-country meets per winter where we bring in area districts as well, and it's just a great opportunity to not only build awareness of what we provide as a tourist attraction, but for the community as well. District 4, of course, that's where our location is. We have a great Arbor Day celebration that we do every spring for the community. It's a free community event. We really wanted to be able to continue at least one event where it's just completely free and open to everyone. So that one was really fun. Unfortunately, we had some weather issues this past spring. It was a cold and windy spring, but we did follow it up with a Sunday Fun Day in June to kind of make up for that. So that was a lot of fun. And then District 5, we kind of rally and send out our troops of instructors to all parts of the county, but the Crosby Library workshops and classes have been a main one. So I wanted to point that out to you guys. And then some of the things that we're just super proud of. Our volunteers, first and foremost, provide so much capacity for us. We've had, of course, our Crow Wing County Master Gardeners are a huge part of how we maintain our grounds, and as well as, provide that knowledge and education for the participants of our programming. But then we also have the Master Naturalist Program, which is also through the University Extension. And then we've had students from CLC help out. We've had volunteers from the Brainerd Garden Club, and then we've had groups come in, like that group of good-looking kids up there. We had 70 kids come in one day this summer from a church group, and they just rallied, and they were in the gardens, and all of these bright green shirts were just everywhere on our grounds, and it was just an amazing experience, not only for us, because they really helped us out and provided capacity, but it also taught them a lot too. Each group of those kids had a lead that was showing them how to weed, how to maintain a garden, how to plant trees, and all of those sorts of things. We're also proud of some key grounds and facility improvements that we've made this summer. So if you are able to attend the open house tomorrow, I'd love to be able to provide more detail around these. But pictures are worth 1,000 words, and these beautiful additions to our grounds, such as improvements to our memorial garden there on the left, new trees. We planted a grove of maple trees here this spring for not only memorial trees, but their educational opportunities as well. And then in the middle, that is the start of our interpretive trail signage that you are going to start seeing a lot more of. So these beautiful signs are developed by one of our fellow master naturalists. This one in particular is the life cycle of a butterfly, but these will be placed throughout our gardens and trail systems as spontaneous ways to learn as you are connecting with nature. And then some other improvements, as that bridge shows up there, key improvements to our trails so that we can have safe walking opportunities for everyone. We do have a fitness trail that has a crushed granite, and it's accessible by wheelchair and wagons and strollers, but we want to provide more opportunities like that. So when we improve our footbridges, that's providing a better and safer route for a lot of our visitors. And then, of course, our nature-based educational programs. I love when we have our kids out at the Arboretum, because it just provides that little happy and joyful noise around our grounds. In particular, our nature camp this year was held on Thursdays, and the topic changed each and every week. And we have everything from learning about butterflies to learning how to do a loon call to dissecting flowers and getting down kind of in the middle of it. So these kids have really been enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the surveys are from the parents at the end of the season. One story that I want to share is a little boy came in and was doing camp for the first couple weeks, and he was really struggling with some of the presentation side of things. We try to sit them down and do a balance of we're going to do traditional learning experiences and then get them outdoors. Well, those experiences where he was sitting down in front of a presentation, he was very antsy, very squirrely. After talking to his mom, they were going through testing for ADHD. But the second he got outside, the second he got on that trail system, he was so focused. He was so inquisitive. He was so curious that it just goes to show that not every kid is the same. Not every kid learns the same. And nature is really a good platform to look at learning in a different way. So I'm proud that we are able to provide those opportunities for the kids that might not fit in the traditional learning curriculum. Next slide. And then lastly, our concentration on conservation. So as you guys know, our 3 pillars: recreation, education, conservation. And one of the things we're proud, we installed what we call a chronologue. And it's a system where you can, the ARB is going to be able to acquire a time-lapse photo of the same environment just from our visitors. So you set your smartphone on that little pillar there, on the picture on the left-hand side, and visitors upload that picture to our website. And we're going to be able to see a time lapse of Whiskey Creek over the series of years. And we're going to see how it changes, how it looks from season to season, and really show maybe what some conservation efforts, how that affects those areas and the wildlife that's there. We also did No Mow May, which is the beautiful picture in the middle. And it goes to show that we don't necessarily have to have a finely manicured lawn in order to have a healthy habitat at the ARB. And then you see the last picture there is our Green Corps member, Nick. He planted over 300 trees in the season that he was with us, and that was in support of our membership drive in May. So we planted a tree for every single member that signed up or renewed that month. So pretty exciting stuff happening at the ARB. So just kind of a recap of what our strategies are. We are making good strides in every single one of those strategies. And I would say that one of the ones that most recently we are focusing on is strategy 6 there is improving the financial health of the entire organization. And we had a strategy session just yesterday with an outside consultant to say, how are we going to move forward as a sustainable organization? With some of the barriers that have come up with our revenue streams, we are still going to provide amazing work for the community, for the county as a whole. But we need key strategies to do that. So that session really allowed us to focus in on what we have the capacity to do and what the next couple of years are going to look like. Next slide. And then looking ahead, just a reminder, we're more than just a green space sitting in Brainerd-Baxter. We are doing strategy sessions to look at what sustainability looks like. And we're recruiting community leaders to be more engaged in the goals of our organization. And like I said, we're creating opportunities for spontaneous learning and connecting people to the outdoors, because ultimately, we're trying to empower people to utilize the outdoors for our own well-being. When I think about that child who was struggling with, being in a classroom setting, but then immediately you could see this weight lifted off of him when he got out into nature, that's how I feel when I get out on the trail system. That's how we can all feel when we are experiencing stress and anxiety in our life, and we need to know how to use nature as a platform to improve our own mental and physical well-being. And then just a reminder that you are invited to the Northland Arboretum tomorrow for our open house. I look forward to sharing more about our grounds and our improvements, and I welcome any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you. I'll be there tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I did see Debbie.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Today we want to talk a little bit about the post-election audit and what that entails after the general election. I want to give you a little bit of background and history on what that is, and then we can talk a little bit about what safeguards are in place or what other options that we have available to us. Since 2006, that is when the post-election audit requirement was put into statute, and it's under Minnesota Statute 206.89, which requires a post-election audit of the voting systems after each general election. And this must include a hand count of the votes that are cast for president or governor, depending on which year it is, U.S. senator, and U.S. representative. The statute does allow for the post-election review of votes cast for additional offices at the discretion of the post-election review official. So there is opportunity to review votes cast for other offices, but at a minimum, we have to review president, governor, U.S. senator, and U.S. representative. So basically all the federal offices as well as the governor's race in that year as well. The requirement is that the canvass board, at the primary election, sets the date, time, and location for the post-election review that will occur after the state general election. So following the primary election, that canvass board that meets to certify the primary results, they do not select which precincts will be reviewed. What they select is the date, the time, and the location, knowing that it must occur between the 11th and the 18th day after a general election. So the post-election review cannot occur before 11 days after the election and has to be complete by 18 days after the election. What the statute requires is that a county with fewer than 50,000 registered voters must review a total of at least 2 precincts. Any counties that have between 50 and 100,000 registered voters must review 3 precincts at least, and any county that has over 100,000 voters must review at least 4 precincts or 3% of the total precincts in the county, whichever is greater. And of those ones that are selected, at least 1 precinct has to have had at least 150 votes cast at that general election. At the general election canvass board, that is when the precincts are randomly selected to be audited. And then once those precincts are selected, each municipality who is chosen appoints election judges representing different political parties who actually conduct the hand count of those ballots. The statute does set a standard of acceptable performance for the voting systems by comparing the results from the tabulators on election day to the hand count results, and the manual count cannot be more than 2 votes cast in a precinct that had less than 1,200 votes. So if less than 1,200 voters were in a particular precinct, the change cannot be more than 2 votes. If there are between 1,200 and 1,599 votes cast, the threshold is 3 votes. And if there are between 1,600 and 1,999 votes cast, that cannot have more than a 4-vote differential, and anything over 2,000 votes cannot have more than a 5-vote difference. The majority of our precincts are in that 1,200-ish range, below 1,200 or 1,200 to 1,500. But regardless, whichever precincts are drawn, you have to look at the number of votes that were cast in that precinct to determine what that threshold should be. What the threshold does not include, according to statute, is any valid votes that have been marked by the voter outside of the target area. So typically when you're doing a hand count, what you see is voter intent. You can see what the voter intended to have counted. And sometimes that means that instead of following the instructions and filling in the oval, they circle the name. The machine is looking for that target area of the oval to determine whether or not a vote was cast for that particular candidate. If the voter did not fill in that oval, but circled the name, the judges who are doing the hand count would be able to tell that that voter intended to vote for that particular candidate. While that would change that vote count, it would not count towards that threshold of 2 votes or 3 votes because the machine would not have known that that was what the intent of the voter was because it's outside of that threshold. The other thing that does not include, that standard does not include, is if a voter uses a pen that the machine cannot read, red ink, green ink. Some of the different colored inks are not able to be scanned by those read head scanners, and as such, that would not count towards that threshold either. Commissioner Coring, you have a question?
So when somebody, and I should just let you finish your thing, but I should just write this question down, but I'll ask it as long as I'm asking now. Okay, so let's say you got your ballot. Let's say this is the general election, and there's 2 people running for Congress. and let's say somebody fills in both for both of them, what happens to that vote for that office?
So if a voter fills in both ovals for the two candidates, and they don't make any indication of trying to cross one out or putting a star next to the one that they truly wanted to vote for, or making any indication, if they just fill in both ovals, when they place it into the tabulator, the machine will give them an error, and it will say, you voted for too many candidates. You're allowed to vote for one, you voted for two. And it will tell them which office they voted too many candidates for. It will tell them how many they are allowed, and it will tell them how many they voted for. And it will give them an option to return that ballot, go back over to the election judge, exchange that spoiled ballot now for a new ballot, and mark their ballot correctly to make sure that they have their vote counts. If they choose not to do that, it will not count for any vote in that race at all. There will be no vote for that race.
Be the same thing if it was a hand count.
Same thing.
If it was a hand count and you're looking at it, then there'd be no vote for anybody in that race.
Correct. It's considered an overvote. If they vote for too many candidates, it's considered an overvote. And even in a hand count situation, it would not pick that up. The difference being in a hand count, when the voter is just placing their ballot into a ballot box, there would be no indication for them to get the opportunity to correct that particular vote.
That's an overvote.
That's an overvote.
Wasn't there a term, I can remember when the hanging chads, wasn't there an undervote?
Undervotes are if you choose not to vote for a particular office. A person can vote as much or as little of the ballot as they choose to vote. And one valid vote on a ballot will trigger that machine to expect and assume, or to the judges who are doing a hand count, to expect and assume that that voter only intended to vote for that one particular race. An undervote will not flag any errors or any kind of a mistake, because oftentimes people choose not to vote for certain offices. You have a whole backside of your ballot that's full of 30-some judicial races that have nobody running against anybody. So instead of filling in the ovals on each and every one, they may choose one or two that they know. They may choose to fill them all in, or they may choose to fill none of them in. So an overvote will not trigger an error.
And that's an undervote.
That is an undervote.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
So Debbie, if I can just, for clarification, you said it flags it if it's an overvote.
Correct.
They have the option to go back and get another ballot.
They have the option to go back and get a new ballot.
But all the other races that were marked correctly, would they already be counted in that machine?
No. So if a voter gets an overvote on a particular ballot, when they place their ballot in, it's not counting anything yet. It's doing that scan to say everything is good, or, oops, here's an error that we need to address. It has not recorded anything from that particular ballot as of yet. If they go back and get a new ballot, they have to mark all of their choices again for all of the offices. And then when they place that new ballot in, that is the one that would get counted.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that because you had said that for that race.
Correct.
It's not counted, but
So
but it's
in-
for the whole ballot, it's,
Right. And in the circumstance, if they did not choose to go back and get a new ballot, if they just allowed the machine to count that race with an overvote, anything that they did mark correctly would be counted correctly. Only that one race that they overvoted would not be counted. And that's the same with the hand count or with the machine count as well.
okay.
So I talked about what those target thresholds are for what the difference can be. And if that standard is not met as noted, then the law requires that you have to draw at least 3 additional races to be reviewed within that jurisdiction if there are multiple precincts. Not still within the same precinct, but for instance, in the city of Brainerd or Baxter or on organized territory, we have multiple precincts within those. If a precinct in the city of Baxter were to not meet that threshold, we would have to count those same races in the other precincts in the city of Baxter. If a full precinct has been counted already, we would draw 3 additional precincts, 3 additional jurisdictions, cities or townships, to count that difference as well. And if that second review indicates a difference beyond that threshold, then all the precincts in the county have to be reviewed, have to be hand counted for those offices. If a voting system is found to have failed to record the votes accurately, that is what this audit is doing. It is recording, it is verifying that the system recorded the votes accurately based on how the voters marked the ballots. Then that system cannot be used in another election until it has been examined and recertified by the Secretary of State's office. We've done the post-election audit every year since, or every general election since 2006, and Crow Wing County has never escalated beyond that first review. We've selected the 2 precincts. They have been hand-counted. They've all been within that threshold, usually at 0 change from what the election day count was. And one other thing to note is the hand count of that precinct includes ballots that are cast at the polling locations, as well as ballots that are cast by absentee or mail ballot as well. So they includes the full scope of ballots that are reviewed for each precinct that is chosen. The primary canvass board did meet last Friday, and they set the date, the time, and the location for the post-election audit to be on Monday, November 21st at 10 a.m. in meeting rooms 1 and 2 of the Land Services Building. This audit is open to the public for observation, just like our public test process is open to the public. The audit has always been open to view for the public, and we have had folks attend in the past for the post-election audit, particularly in certain years when there is a recount that is already going to happen. They did change the statute a few years ago to say if a race has a recount that has already been requested, it does not get counted during the post-election audit. So for instance, during the 2008 U.S. Senate race or the 2010 governor race, those both had election contests that had been filed. They were not, they were counted in both the post-election review and during the recount. That law changed after that process. Additionally, Statute 206-895 requires that the Secretary of State conduct a review of procedures, not just the machine counts, but they're actually looking at procedures that are used in the polling places and in the elections offices for at least 4 precincts in each congressional district following each general election. Those precincts are selected by the state canvassing board following each general election, and that review is usually conducted in January or February of the following year. Now, Congressional District 8 is quite large. There are a number of precincts within that district, but we have been selected more than once for that procedure review by the Secretary of State's office, and there have been no findings that have been reported in any of those audit reviews either. I have a couple of statistics from the primary election I just kind of wanted to go over with you so that you have that information. I did cover it with the canvass board on Friday, but just so that all of you are aware, we have 45,543 registered voters in Crow Wing County prior to the start of Election Day last Tuesday. So that puts us in that under 50,000 registered voter range, which is why we have to draw a total of at least 2 precincts when we are doing our post-election audit. We did do 221 new registrations on Election Day. There were 9,271 total votes cast in the primary, which is 20.26% of our registered voters. 7,508 of those were at the polling places on Election Day, and 1,763 were accepted absentee or mail ballots. That means that about 19% of all the ballots cast were cast by mail or absentee ballot. And the census data says that Crow Wing County has eligible voters of about 53,143. That's assuming that people who are over 18 years of age in Crow Wing County who are permanent residents are eligible to vote, which equates to about 17.45% of our eligible voter population that voted in the primary last week. So that's a background data on the post-election review process. What other questions do you have that I could answer for you?
Well, go ahead. No, Mr. Chair, if you remember, it would be the second to the last board meeting, because we had a board meeting today, correct? Correct. So that board meeting, I thought I asked about, can the county board double the amount of random checks? And I think you said yes. And I thought that we were going to have a discussion. I know I can't talk to everybody, but I talked to Bill a little bit about figuring out how we can ensure that people have confidence in their voting system.
Correct.
So,
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, you are correct. We did do the review, and because the statute says that it allows for at least or requires at least 2 precincts to be audited, that the determination is you can choose to have however many precincts that you want to have audited.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I can too, Debbie, you've really laid out, I mean, the checks and balances that we have. And I also can see why you're recognized as one of the best in the state in regards to running an election.
Thank you.
So that I got to say thank you. But Mr. Chair, too, I value the open forum as a place where people can come and express their concerns or their issues that they have with the county. But I do believe this election issue has become a political platform. And I think that with that, I think it's not time to bring that discussion to an end as we go forward, and especially getting into that. The county had offered a public viewing of the machines and how that process attended. We had, I believe, 3 people that have been attending these meetings. There's 3 that came in attendance for that. I do want to give the group that have been attending to this credit too, because we've added a number of election judges. And I think that was good. And I hope that was a positive experience for those people that participated as those election judges as we come forward. We have heard, though, from their concerns that we've tried to respond to those things that we agreed upon. And so we've done some of that. But we've also heard from our constituents, too, that they're not in favor of spending more money on a process that they believe has been fair and accurate in what they're doing. And they believe that the machines, which I also kind of support and go with. So I think it's time to put the election issue to bed and time to recognize the support for our election judges and for our staff that are really working hard to do a fair and honest election. And I think as we go with that. So I think what our encouragement needs to be is that we need to encourage people to get out and vote. That's going to be the big thing that really makes that difference, because I think the checks and balances are there so that we can have an accurate election. So I think that with that, Mr. Chair, is that I would either like to see us look at a resolution to go forward as we move forward with this, so we can address this at our next meeting, that we would randomly select twice as many precincts to hand count that is required by law in a general election. If there's anybody that feels that they would like additional precincts counted, that would be then at their expense as we go forward. And then I think that we would then not take this issue up in regards to election process until after the November election.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, I think I'll support that. One other thing that I guess I'd like to have a discussion about with the board and you, Deb, is because I've seen some emails going back and forth, and I've read them, and on the cast vote record, which I kind of understand, but I'm uncertain yet. Could you just give me a little refresher on that? I don't quite understand what it is. Anyway, just if you could just refresh me on that, and if it's not a big deal to have this cast vote record, maybe we could incorporate that into a resolution also to have that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, yes. The cast vote record, I think, sometimes gets some confusion from people. One of the things to keep in mind, I've talked about a number of times with regard to one of the ways that we have election security is we do not have a federal elections system. Every state sets their own laws and rules as it governs voter registration, who's eligible to vote, what the absentee or mail ballot processes are. They govern what equipment can be used or how it can be used. And while equipment has to meet federal guidelines that are set out by the Elections Assistance Commission, one of the things that the states also have to do is determine what certified federal equipment will be allowed to be used in states as well. In Minnesota, we only allow for the use of optical scan voting equipment, which basically means that the ballots have to be paper ballots. They have to be the same ballot for every voter. You can't have a different ballot for a voter who is using a ballot marking device as what you have for a voter who's marking it with a pen. Every voter uses the same type of paper ballot in a polling location. And they can only be counted, tabulated electronically with optical scan voting equipment, which has been shown many, many times over as being the gold standard in elections equipment. And that has been noted across the country. And in fact, many states have moved to having optical scan as their standard. There are some states who have what they call direct recording systems, or DREs, direct recording of electronic voting systems. This is sometimes referred to as touchscreen voting, where you get a list of ballot races that show up on a screen. You tap the screen to select what your choice is, and it automatically records that vote immediately. It's not a hanging chad. I don't think that there are very many states, if any, that still use the punch card systems, but back in 2000, when we had hanging chads, Minnesota had already moved on from punch card systems at that point in time, but there were still some states who were using them. The DRE system, the direct recording system, does not give a voter a certified piece of paper that they are putting their ballot on. So they're selecting that. Sometimes it will show a review of the list that they have, of the candidates that they have chosen, and then when they hit submit, it drops a paper receipt into the ballot box that will have what that list is for that purpose. That is often where you hear about the cast vote record, are those states that use DRE machines, because it actually has a list of all the selections that are taken from each one of those devices. There are multiple devices within a polling location. Think about each voting booth having a direct recording, a touchscreen system. So it keeps track of each vote that is cast on each particular unit. Optical scan systems, depending on the vendor and what the system is that's being used, do have an option for a cast vote record, which would show by times, every time a ballot is recorded, it would show basically the same data that is on that paper ballot. And that has been the stance in Minnesota based on the information that is in our statute saying that the ballots themselves are the official record of what was actually cast. While the machines are used to tabulate what was marked on those ballots, the ballots themselves are the official record and are as such the cast vote record. There's not a report that's needed to say what's on the ballots because you already have the ballots that show what is on the ballot. Additionally, because there are different vendors that are certified to be used in Minnesota, not every system was capable of producing a cast vote record report. So a lot of data requests that are asking for cast vote record reports are maybe based on information that's coming from other states. It may be that it meets the criteria of one particular vendor, but not another. Some of them are a little bit different. We do know that we have the ability to create a cast vote record report. We know that we have that now with our system upgrade, that we would be able to do that. What we don't know yet and what we need to do some more research on is whether or not it actually is able to tie back immediately to the voter to be able to note how someone voted. Because if you have a list of every action that is taken on a particular machine, if I know that I was voter number 7 in the polling place, I'm going to be able to see the 7th ballot cast is my vote. But I'm also going to be able to know the person ahead of me in line was voter number 6, I can see how they voted. And the person behind me was voter number 8, and I can see how they voted. We have some precincts that have small turnout. You know, we have a precinct in the city of Brainerd in your district, Commissioner Coring, that has 7 registered voters, and they had 2 people who voted in the primary election on election day. It wouldn't take a lot of effort to be able to figure out how each one of those 2 people voted if you have that cast vote record that would be able to show that information. One of the things of what we are trying to find information on is if that report could be randomized to just give a record of every ballot that was cast, so that every ballot that was scanned, it would show what that is for each precinct, broken down by the device that is scanned on, whether it's absentee or in the polling place, but would be randomized so it would not tie directly back to voter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And while I don't have that information yet, I'm hopeful that we will have that in the near future.
Well, I personally, I could care less if anybody knows who I voted for, but I know a lot of people that want the secret ballot. They don't, it's nobody's business who they voted for. And I want to protect, I want to make sure we're protecting that. So Mr. Hool, so when you or whoever's going to put this resolution together, can we word it in a way that we will, and could you try to find out by the time the next board meeting comes, if we can randomize it or make sure that people can't tell who somebody's voting for? I don't think any of us want that. I think that could be a recipe for disaster myself, but I'd like to have that cast vote record, if it's randomized, have that report, because people have been asking for that, and if you can incorporate that in there, is that all right? What do you think, Bill?
No, I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay.
I think it'd be a good addition.
What do you guys think?
Mr. Chair, if I might ask Commissioner Brecken, remind me how you're increasing from 2, which is our current requirement, to, you said 2 additional ones?
I said we'd double it.
We'd double it. So my question when it comes to verbiage is, let's say in my race, it ends up with less than one half of 1%, so there's an automatic recount. And using that verbiage, how are you going to find double in my area? Because it's a set number. There's 8 precincts
Right.
that I represent. So I don't understand how we could double that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Barrows, just 2 points of clarification. There is no such thing as an automatic recount. The threshold of 0.5% determines on who pays for it. In any circumstance, whether it is a federal office, a state office, a county office, a city office, whatever it may be, if a candidate wishes to have the votes recounted, they have to request that there be a recount of it. If it is within that threshold of X number of votes or a percentage of a percent based on the office level that it is, that determines who pays for it. If it's within the threshold, the organization or the governing body, in this case, if it was a county commissioner race, the county would pay for that recount. If it is outside of that threshold, the requesting candidate would have to pay for that recount. So there wouldn't be an automatic recount that would occur in any circumstance. With regard to the post-election review, they're not just done within a jurisdiction. We would be randomly drawing, in this case, 4 precincts throughout all of Crow Wing County. And so while there's only 8 precincts in your district, we wouldn't be drawing 4 out of all 8 precincts. We would maybe be drawing 1 from Baxter. Maybe it's 1 that comes out of Crosby. Maybe we draw Breezy Point. Whatever it might be that randomly comes out of the box are the precincts that would be counted as part of the post-election audit. It would have nothing to do with the recount situation. And unless you also directed to review additional ballots or additional precincts offices on those ballots, we would never be hand counting the county commissioner race as part of the post-election audit to begin with. So if there was a recount that was requested, that would be done again at a different time.
Okay, and I'm only getting at the point that we say we double it. We shouldn't double it. What we should do is 2 times whatever the state requires us to do for that recount, if that's what we're going to do, the certification. The other thing that I have concern about is that this group has indicated their concern is with the machines. It's not, I mean, they've also talked about, counting the ballots, which we do for certification, but I'm not sure that this resolution addresses the concern of this group, which is the machines. And I'm not asking them to stand up and answer that question, but I'm not sure what we're attempting to do is going to resolve the issue. I'll say no more at this point.
Well, I know that's not going to resolve the issue, because I think, at least what I've heard from the group, is they don't want any machines. They want it all hand counted, the whole thing. And I feel that's not feasible. It really isn't. I believe that if we double or 2 times the amount of precincts that we're randomly selecting out of a hat to see if there's any fraudulent activity going on, in my mind, that fixes whatever problem there is. This, I don't know if we have enough people, we don't have enough time to hand count if there's 45,000 votes. And you don't just go and count all the people on here. It's every race.
Correct.
So start with this race.
Correct. So in a
Very-
general election, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, in a general election, there could be 35 to 40 or more races on a particular ballot. There are, I believe I counted, there are 28 judicial races alone. Plus you have federal, state, county, city, school district, hospital board in some cases. All of those, soil and water, all of those different races, you would, if you have 40 to 50 races on a ballot, you are touching a ballot 40 to 50 times when you're doing a hand count, because you count each race, you make a pile for each candidate, you count each pile, and you double count each pile, because humans have more opportunity and there is more error rate with a hand count when you have that type of a process than there is with the optical scan.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can, really what we are kind of accomplishing here is that, we're using the open forum as a platform, a political platform. And I think what we're saying is we've heard what they've wanted to say. They've been saying the same thing over and over again. What we're saying is that our meetings are important, we want to hear from people, but this discussion now, we've heard enough. We don't need any more information, we just want to move forward. So again, opening up our meetings so that our open forums are legitimate for people to be able to express their concerns. We've heard the concerns, it's now that this discussion does not need to be brought to the board any longer.
And then I guess I think that with this resolution, this is the county board's response. It probably is, I know I can see by the look on Mark's face that this isn't what you want, but I think this is I don't know if it's meeting halfway, but I still say that I have total confidence in Crow Wing County's elections. Do I have confidence in Minneapolis? No, I don't. But I think what we're trying to at least do here with this resolution, double the amount of randomly selected precincts and to show that everything is accurate. And I think that's what the county board, or at least that's what I would like to accomplish with this. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Debbie, what would be the additional cost for if we went strictly a hand count?
Oh my. Mr. Chair, if we went to strictly a hand count, I would need to do the math of what would be involved with that, but it would be significant. It would be significant because you're talking about needing additional bodies and additional hours to be able to tabulate what those results would be. Time-wise, it would take multiple days to count the races on the ballots at the end of election night before you would have any results that you would be working with.
So on election night, you wouldn't
You would not
any
have results on election night.
And we're talking levy dollars.
They are all levy dollars. There are no other sources of revenue for elections outside of levy dollars.
Correct.
Right now, an average election costs us between $250,000 and $300,000. That is not with the additional cost of what the municipalities have for their election judge costs. And that's the other thing to keep in mind. Your cities and townships are the ones who are recruiting and paying their election judges. So that additional cost would also have to be passed down. If we were going to go with strictly a hand count, that's a cost that's going to be borne by your cities and townships, because the majority of that cost is going to be in labor for the election judges and the time for them to actually count them.
So it wouldn't be on a line to say it could reach $1 million.
I don't want to put a dollar
Countywide,
figure
but-
on it until I would actually do the math, but it would be
uh,
significant.
Levy dollars.
It would
is
be
what I'm
significant levy dollars, yes.
saying. Any other?
Do you kind of have
$1 million is
it
almost
figured out
3%
kind of
on the
what we
levy.
were getting at, Tim?
Yes, I did not hear what Commissioner Franzine said.
Yeah.
I said, and $1 million is approximately 3% on the levy.
That's true. I will draft a resolution consistent with what I've heard today, put it forward for your consideration at the next board meeting.
Thank you.
And I will make sure that I have the information on whether that cast vote record report can be randomized prior to that time.
If it
that we
can be,
can.
I'd like to
Absolutely.
have us do that.
Yep, absolutely.
And could you have a approximate cost?
I will do some work to see what I can come up with an approximate cost and time for hand count as well.
Thank you.
Could I can't recall your name in the blue here. Yeah. Would you be willing to come forward and just tell us what your knowledge of the CVR is? I seen you shaking your head pretty, to me, violently.
Well, I was really happy. I was really happy, Doug and Paul, that you addressed it. And that's one of the main things that we're asking, is that you turn it on.
Right.
And you guys, that's why I was shaking my head really violently, because you guys got the message. We're just asking that you turn that switch on. Here's what you need to do, you guys. Yes, we are opposed to the machines for many reasons, okay? And there's not just us. There's all kinds of counties throughout Minnesota, if you're following this. But the CVR is a help, and Debbie explained it to you. It gives you a record of the votes. I don't believe that you'll be able to determine who is voting and who is not voting.
And what do you base that on?
What do I base that on?
Yeah.
On just knowing what I've read and what I've studied about the CVR. So I don't know that to be a fact. I'd have to go back and study it a little bit more. But if you have a system and all you have to do is turn on a button to get another report out that would verify the actual ballots, why wouldn't you do that? All you have to do is turn a button on, and then this verifies the count, and the excuse is, we have the ballots. Okay, we get it, you have the ballots, but wouldn't it be great to have two things? Are you following that?
I am.
Okay.
I question, are you going to be satisfied if we flip that switch on? Is that going to be all it takes to
That's
satisfy
going to
your
be, that's going
concerns?
to, yes, I think that's going to be big, Doug, because you guys are hearing us. We would prefer, as was said, that the machines would be gone. But we aren't going to get that. We understand that. But to turn the switch on is a huge help.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Mark, I will tell you that I have heard from other people as I'm at Oak Lawn or I'm at Green Lantern that people say they don't agree. They don't think there's anything wrong. So
Sure.
I have heard from people on the other side.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
don't think that you speak for 65,000 people in Crow Wing
Of course
County.
I
Yeah,
don't.
Okay.
I get that. Of course
And
I don't.
I guess I think what we're all trying to do here is we've heard you, we're trying to respond, and this is going to be our response. But I will tell you that, and I don't think any of us want to do anything to affect the integrity of a secret ballot.
Well, of
Secret
course
ballot
not.
is sacrosanct,
Well,
if you ask me.
Amen. But just know that you have the right information. When we requested CVR, we didn't get much information on it. Okay? So if we aren't getting information, what are we supposed to do? We assume, okay, is somebody trying to hide something? Now, I'm not accusing anybody of that, but we are digging and digging and digging. Did you guys even know what CVR was a month ago?
No,
I didn't.
I did not.
I didn't know what it was 4 months ago.
No.
So we're all learning in the process. Do we think there was trouble in 2020? Yes, no question. And it's going to be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. But in Crow Wing County, probably not. Probably not. We run a nice, I think, a good county, but we're just saying, okay, let's be the gold standard of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And that's what we were trying to encourage you guys to do. And you guys were the first ones actually in the state to come out and say, yeah, we want to question Steve Simon.
Yeah.
Now, I particularly think what you did was, it was a 4-1 vote. Mr. Barrows didn't vote for it. I have no idea why, but he didn't vote for it. That's fine, that's his business. But I don't think it was adjudicated right by Steve Simon. But we're going to find all that out in November, right?
Right.
So you guys, honestly, you've listened, and I think we've been very respectful as a group. And so that's why I was nodding my head, okay? Any more?
Is there additional cost to turn that on?
Mr. Chair, it is probably not additional cost to turn it on. It's just something that has never been done before. But I don't believe that there would be any additional cost that would be associated with it.
I asked when I went and voted at South Long Lake, and we had a couple of judges there, and I talked to them, and I know Patsy Olson pretty good. I didn't recognize she was standing there. But I asked the group there, all the judges, if they even knew what CVR was. None of them knew. Patsy didn't know.
Mr. Chair, and it's not a report that comes off the machine, so the election judges would not
No,
know what a
I get
CVR
that.
report is.
It was a valid question. I
Election
get it.
judges are there to administer the process in the polls on election day.
Of course they are.
Right.
I get that. I just did it. I just asked the question and the reason I ask it is to see how people were in tune to what was going on.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm addressing you, but I do have a question for Mr. Olson. You said you didn't know anything about the CVR report prior to a month ago or so when you started digging into it.
Right.
Why would you expect that anybody else would know about it?
I didn't expect him to know.
And where did you find your information?
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, that's my question. If you're looking for information on an elections process, I would think that you would go to a source that would be able to provide the information correctly. As I mentioned at the beginning when I talked about the CVR report, every state has different laws and rules as it pertains to elections in those
Absolutely.
situations. So I would
Absolutely.
hope
I
that you
get
used
that.
a source that was Minnesota-specific, that's applied to the laws in Minnesota.
Correct. Absolutely. 100%.
That's all I wanted to make sure that you were doing.
100%. All we're asking for is turn the button on.
Because
And
I
it
will
doesn't
say-
cost a dime.
Mr.
So-
Chair, I will say some of the data requests that we have received have been cut and paste data requests that have come from different states, based on language that is in statute of different states, not Minnesota-specific information. So if there is non-getting of information, there is non-responsive data if we don't have something that applies to Minnesota law.
If you ask for something that
Yes.
has not been turned on, we will respond.
Sure.
There is no responsive data.
Sure.
That doesn't mean it couldn't get turned on,
Correct.
and the issue is randomization,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Nobody wants to be able to.
Exactly.
be
I
able to go
get it,
number
and
one,
we
number
all
two.
get that.
There might be a lot of people that are really pissed off because people know how they voted.
Well,
They're not
sure,
gonna be happy. They're gonna be-
if that be the case, Paul, that's, you guys have already addressed that. Mr. Houle just said it. You don't want that.
Nope.
We don't want that.
I think there's gonna be a lot of people mad if
But
that-
I don't believe that's what's gonna happen. But you guys will have to take that up.
If we can randomize it, I think what it does give folks is a granular level of detail that is public information.
Correct.
And the ballots are not public data. So while they are retained, they cannot be inspected. And I think that's partly part of these guys' issue. They would like to be able to inspect the granular level detail. As long as it can be randomized so that we don't identify anybody, there's no harm in that. And so it does give them something they don't have today. And I think it probably would get to the root of what their issue is. At least I hope so. you know, Mark, we have been trying to listen, and.
Oh,
you guys
absolutely,
have
and we
been-
don't disagree with that.
Yeah, you guys have been respectful with us, and so we are
Yes.
trying our darndest to be
Right.
respectful back to you guys, and even if we don't agree about everything, that
Correct.
doesn't mean we can't agree about some things.
And Mark, I see you're running for town board in Long Lake.
Oh, no, that's
One-
not me, I think
that's not
that's
you?
Pat's, no, that's
Because I was
Patsy.
going to come to every meeting and say I want my road tarred, and I want it now.
But I might run in 2 years, who knows? 2 Mark Olsons on there.
It's a different
Any-
Mark Olson?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, yeah,
All right, well, thank you, and.
you bet. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
I believe, did you have something to add? We will not take.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it real short, but I think the reason why, I worked as an election judge, and I think the thing that with the cast vote record is it will show any kind of ballot dumping. It's going to show you when they voted, and if there's a whole pile of votes going through in a short period of time, I think that's what the real purpose of that is, and why it's pertinent. Okay?
Mr. Chair, may I just ask a question?
Yes.
So, sir, you were an election judge in the election on Tuesday?
Yeah.
So based on your service as an election judge, was there opportunity for that to occur? Did you have to reconcile the number of ballots at the
Well,
beginning of the
that's-
day and at the end of the night?
We're setting the gold standard for Minnesota. There's problems in certain parts of the state. I'm not gonna.
As the gold standard, are you people attending other county board meetings throughout the state? Requesting, like approximately, how many?
I said, your statement was correct. How many county board meetings we've been?
How many different counties have you made this presentation to on the CVRs?
There's 3 other counties.
3 other? Okay. And what's their reception to your request?
Not as good as you guys, but they're still pushing.
Well, this is Minnesota's favorite place, so that's why. What, isn't it?
Well,
We're working on it.
I think Commissioner.
Our logo. Sherburne counties want, okay?
To Commissioner Brecken's point, you know, we're trying to find a middle ground.
Exactly.
But I'm also going to listen and respect those election judges that feel that we have a safe, as I do, a fair election process. And there are a lot of those folks out there that feel a little bit appalled by what we're doing. And I want to make sure that we're not losing focus of those people as well. So if we find this middle ground, great, but that's still, we'll decide that next Tuesday, I guess, when we bring this as a resolution. All right. Okay. Is anything else, Deb?
Nothing else.
All right.
Thank you, David.
We will move on to our final, and we invite you all to stay for the short-term rental
Yes.
subject.
It'll be
Yeah,
riveting.
please. And
Riveting.
this, again, is just a example that we do have other things that we work on here, so. Yeah, well, we're not done. Love you to stay. Guess not.
Jake, you might as well come forward, too. Our next item. Do you want to take a break, or?
Yeah, let's take a break, and just a short one, sorry, but
Cheers for sure.
we're just on overload right
I
now.
think I will call them.
Okay, we're good to go. The last item on the agenda today is short-term rentals. Is that, I see it has Tim, but,
I'll do it.
okay.
Just an introduction, but we have capable staff here who will actually be able to answer any substantive questions you have. We got a group together recently to take a look at the short-term rental ordinance. It was at Commissioner Hoag's request. We have received an inquiry from a jurisdiction that would like us to not license short-term rentals within their jurisdiction. So I will direct you to Article 2.3, where we are proposing language which would say where if a property would be exempt from licensing if the property is located within a jurisdiction that prohibits all short-term rentals within their jurisdiction. If there is no, if their local zoning law prohibits short-term rentals, then there is no public health threat from a short-term rental. And so we believe that we can carve out this language, and as long as they could verify to us that they prohibit short-term rentals within their jurisdiction, then we would not license anyone in that jurisdiction. Someone who approaches us, we would tell them it is prohibited, you need to go see your city or your township. So I would direct you to that. The other one I
No,
would...
wait on that. So what you're saying is, like, well, let's just use in my district then, Crow Wing Township does their own planning and zoning. If they don't want any short-term rentals in their township, they can tell us, and then we don't issue licenses?
That's correct.
I thought you said it was the
Well,
opposite way.
I had thought that there was some legal opinion stating just the opposite, but I guess that's why we have these people
We
here.
were looking for an opt-in option and can't find one. So we can find an opt-out option, but the issue is public health, and townships and cities don't have public health authority. Counties have public health authority. So it is the exercise of public health authority. And so we can't go in and allow them to pick and choose when they have no public health authority, which of our public health regulations they're going to want. This way was, if they prohibit them entirely, there is no public health risk because there isn't a short-term rental. So they could effectively opt out, not opt in.
Okay.
So everyone is still in unless they essentially prohibit them, and that's an opt-out.
So the city of, let's say Ironton, if they'd have to have that in their ordinance, city ordinance.
Short-term rentals prohibited in their jurisdiction, everywhere. What we can't get into is the business of, it's allowed in some of their zoning districts, but not in others of their zoning districts. We don't know where their zoning districts are.
So
We don't administer them.
let's say if somebody wanted to, in Ironton, they want to build a 40-room motel, that's short-term rental. So it's not?
Nope. It's governed by state law, and
Health
the
Department.
State Department of Health would license that. It's not covered by our ordinance.
Is it a certain amount of rooms? Okay. All right, go ahead.
We're looking at that, and the other issue is, there was some conversation that I heard among you about 4 people per bedroom plus 1, as maybe that's a high occupancy, I don't know. That is in 5.2A. We did not put a number change there, but you can see that it would be easy to make a change there if you are so inclined. Those are the 2 major substantive changes. We've got some other definitional changes in here, but those are the 2 things we thought you'd probably want to sink your teeth into. But we're happy to talk about any of the changes that you saw in the board packet.
Tim, the 4 plus 1, so are you saying 5 people per bedroom?
It's 4 per bedroom plus 1 additional. And our right, wrong, or indifferent, the thought there was a nuclear family. And so if you had an extended family coming together, mom, dad, 2 kids in a room. That's how we got to 4. And then the plus 1, I think, I don't remember that.
You know, Mr. Chair and Tim, I think that was just looking at some other ordinances that had, you know, when we crafted this, that as an extra kind of a floater deal. The other thing I should mention is, you know, we looked at a little bit on this occupancy issue of if we went from 4 to 3, what are the complaints we're getting? A lot of noise complaints. And so it's difficult on the occupancy since we don't go inside at 10 o'clock at night and physically count bodies in beds, right? Because the occupancy is for sleeping, not for daytime use. And so just something to consider as you think about whether the occupancy is appropriate to change from 4 to 3 and how that looks. I think what we get is the noise that's easily enforceable because we have a police report that says we broke up the party, we broke up the issue, we told them, that's a verifiable complaint. It's been more difficult to say, do they have 4 per bedroom at 11 o'clock at night? Knock, 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 we're gonna go in each bedroom. So, yeah.
Okay, so I got a question then. So is there some short-term rental police officer that goes out there and it says, hey, you guys are too loud? Or does the sheriff's department go out there and tell them that, hey, shut up?
No. Well,
Is that what
Commissioner,
happens?
well, Commissioner Corning, it's a great question, and actually,
Great question.
any police or local police jurisdiction can enforce the disturbing the peace ordinance or law, state law, and whether we have a short-term rental ordinance or not. And so oftentimes it is going to be a sheriff or a city police that goes and receives those calls,
Right.
and then we check for those reports. But they're not designated for short-term rental checks, just general noise complaints.
But then why do we need a short-term rental ordinance if the sheriff's department is the one that we call to take care of that problem?
Mr. Chair, that is your prerogative.
Huh?
That is your prerogative, not ours.
Mr. Chair, if I might,
Okay, so I'm asking you then. Why?
That is your prerogative.
Yeah, well.
It is not up to us to decide whether you're going to have a short-term rental ordinance. We can advise
Okay,
you on the
Steve.
pros and cons.
Mr. Chair, if I might, there's other concerns other than just noise.
He didn't bite on
There,
that one.
there is, going onto other people's property, the parking issue that we've heard about. We were at one short-term rental, stealing wood off from another person's property so they can have a campfire. So noise isn't the only issue that takes place in these short-term rentals. There's other concerns. It's the septic systems, the well systems. So there are other things other than noise. Noise is one of the more noticeable ones, but there are other concerns that we are trying to address in the short-term ordinance.
Steve, where do we fall then on property rights? Property rights is a pretty darn important thing, I think, to a lot of people. And when government is intervening, I don't know, whatever it is, telling you what you can and can't do with your property, where do we come down on that? I mean, it's this, you take like Ironton says, well, we don't want any short-term rentals up there. I think I'd take them to court and sue them and say, this is my property. I should have some property rights, shouldn't I?
I won't disagree with, in theory, what you're saying. What I would offer up is, whose property rights are we talking about? Is it yours or is it your neighbor's?
Yeah.
And if you're causing the neighbors some bad experiences with your short-term rental, people parking on their property, throwing garbage around, then whose property rights do we take on? And that's always been our problem with property rights, is whose property rights are we talking about? And I think our ordinances try to address that in more of a global way so that we can have some kind of a peace or an organized approach to property rights. But you're right, it's a difficult question to ask,
And then
answer.
I think about if somebody has a family reunion and there's a gazillion cars and they're parking on somebody else's property and they're loud and everything. So how do we handle that? And it's not a short-term rental, it's just a family gathering. I hope we're not gonna intervene in something like that.
If they're loud and it disturbs the peace, they'll be calling law enforcement to address that issue. If they're parking on the neighbor's property, the neighbor has a right to ask them to get off their property, and if they don't, then they would call law enforcement again.
Correct.
I believe that's how it would be handled. I'm not a law enforcement officer, but
Mr. Chair, it appears that most of the problems that we have with short-term rentals are handled by the sheriff. I mean, if you're stealing off the neighbor's property, who are you going to call? The sheriff. If you have noise at the middle of the night, who are you going to call? The sheriff. It seems like just most of these issues you call the sheriff for.
Well,
How does this make it any different?
Well, Commissioner, one of the things that the short-term rental ordinance does is we have a provision that says if we have 3 verified complaints within a year, that we would remove their license. We would remove their ability to advertise as a short-term rental. Whereas without the short-term rental ordinance, people would still call the police and they would act, but there would be no removal of that kind of activity. So that I would say is one difference, is the ordinance allows for that license to be taken away.
I think the other thing that I see too is that we get involved in a lot of septic issues that we might not otherwise get involved in sooner than we otherwise would, because compliance is a requirement in the ordinance. And it is a more intensive use, and so it probably we should make sure that it is in compliance. Protecting the resource is the appeal question that comes up all the time.
Well, and I want to make sure our water is protected. I think everybody on this board does, because our water is our lifeline. But how many out of compliance septics have you found with this ordinance?
Well, I don't have in front of me the exact numbers of how many systems needed to be upgraded because they're undersized, or how many of them have failed a compliance inspection. But certainly there are a number of them. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but
How many licensed short-term rentals have you got?
I'm gonna look behind me a bit. Gary, do you recall the ballpark?
About 350
Yeah.
right now, Brad?
How many complaints last year?
We must have been north of 30.
Yeah.
Jake, when somebody builds a house, the septic is designed based on number of bedrooms, is that correct?
That is correct.
And does that take into account how many people per bedroom, or how does that work?
So the short answer is no, it does not. It's just number of bedrooms. However, the state MPCA guidelines or rules for septic systems assumes a capacity of 2 people per bedroom. That's the assumption when they make all these design flows.
So as it sets today, we could have as many as 5.
We would have 4 per bedroom, and then maybe one of them would have 5 because of that extra.
Or it could be a air mattress on the floor, it could be the 5th in that bedroom.
It could be.
So we're basically doubling the number of people per bedroom, or that put stress on that septic.
Short answer would be yes. However, we do make sure they're sized appropriately for the number of bedrooms. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not for the number of people.
Not for the number of people.
We do not, get into the details on the septic sizing of number of people.
Well, that's why I always thought that 4 is too many.
So did I.
And I would like to eventually see that number changed. We could debate how many, but as far as I'm concerned, it should be what the system is designed when the structure's built. So if that's 2.
The only thing is, Doug, is what if you have a short-term rental in the city of Brainerd and you have 4 bedrooms and they're on city water and sewer? That's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. And Mr. Chair, too, a lot of people, do bunk beds too, in a bed, so that's 4,
Correct.
there again, you're going to have 4 people in there.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the case too that it's difficult to determine. So what Jake is saying is so I build a house and I follow, the permitting process, and I build my septic to those standards. And then 5 years down the road, I buy another house somewhere else and I go live in Florida. But I rent my house out, and the septic system is built to that 2-person per bedroom standard, but now I have a short-term rental and I've doubled the number of people in there. So I really built it to what is allowed when I built the house, the original house, in the septic system. I followed the rules, and now you're going to make me dig that up and have a larger septic system? We don't do that, do we, Jake?
No, our ordinance is not designed right now to count individual bedrooms and counts and say, this one has more than 2 per bedroom, so we need you to increase your drain field size to accommodate the extra people in this bedroom, and stuff like that. And I should also note that currently in our land use ordinance, even without renting, it's just number of bedrooms.
Right.
And I don't want to alarm anyone who's listening. if they have 3 kids in their bedroom, that they should immediately evacuate one of them.
Immediately,
It's just.
because we're gonna hire Bill to be the counter after he's gone. He's gonna go and go 1, 2, 3.
There's a lot of variables that go into sizing a septic system.
Right.
And the state has to make some
Line.
assumptions.
Yep,
And so the 2 per bedroom is an assumption.
it is.
The water usage that they're using for those 2 people is on the high side. It's not as if your septic system, when you get to the 3rd person in the bedroom, it suddenly starts to overflow.
That's right.
It's not that precise. It is sized up based on the water usage. So I don't think our septic systems are over capacity when they have a family reunion. It's an intensive use for a short period of time. It probably shocks the system, but it doesn't make the system fail. There is capacity beyond just precisely 2.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in vacation rentals, they're not rented 52 weeks out of the year.
No.
You know, if you get 8 to 10 weeks out of it, good weeks, so there's a lot of downtime and for those septics.
And that is why we got to 4, is because we said, look, it's gonna be an intensive activity, but typically for relatively short periods of time. So it's a burst of activity. That's why we went to 4 and thought, even though we know, but that's what we know.
Do we look at it girls versus boys? Because I would think girls probably flush more, right? No?
I think you better be quiet.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a fact, isn't it, or?
I don't think anyone else is gonna touch that with a
Okay.
10-foot pole.
What about the septic systems with short-term rentals? Is that number higher than just your standard home as far as non-compliant? Do we know what?
I would say based on, and again, I'm going to say anecdotally, because I don't have it here.
Yeah.
I would say we have not observed a statistically significantly higher rate of failure among short-term rentals than the general residential homes that we're seeing. And our compliance rate for general residential rate last year was 92% on average. This is for compliance inspections, sorry. 92% of them passed their compliance inspection. Historically, it's been around 95%, and so that's kind of where we're at.
And before we had a short-term rental ordinance, there were short-term rentals in operation, and we were not aware of any of them failing. That was also, I know we discussed it originally.
How do we know if they're failing? I mean, do you look at the drain field and at the end, and then if there's water there?
Typically, a drain field is what fails, and it blows out. And so it starts seeping.
I see.
Usually neighbors will call us if the property owner doesn't, but we typically hear about
What's it normally do? Just evaporate out of there, or
or
what?
run to the lake and the nutrients and
No,
that.
but I mean, if it's working properly, does it evaporate out?
Well, so the septage is pumped from the tank to a drain field
Right.
typically, and then that is soil treated. And there's 3 feet of separation to allow that treatment to happen and remove the bad materials through
So it
natural action.
infiltrates
That's
down
correct.
through the soil.
That is correct.
There's I always kind of thought that the drain field that the sun would help,
It does.
what am I looking for?
Evaporation.
Evaporation.
But it is
No?
probably more.
We want to make sure the soil is treating the issue on these septic systems and they're properly maintained, and the vast majority do so. A compliance inspection will check to make sure we do have that 3 feet of separation of good soil to treat it. If it doesn't, it will fail, and they need to remedy that. They'll check the tank integrity and other issues as
Well,
well.
mound system would be if it's not soil that's conducive to filtering out, correct? Or
Yep,
You
Commissioner
don't
Coring?
have 3 feet of good soil?
Okay.
You add it until you do,
Okay.
and there's your mound.
Yeah.
Back to the carving out, what then is required? I think we talked about a resolution back from the city stating that's their preference. Is that
I'm gonna.
that it, or is there a ordinance update, or how does that all?
I'm going to
work?
go to Stephanie on this one.
Chair Board, Hoag, we would need a ordinance passed within the cities that says that they ban short-term rentals, or the township.
Certified copy of the resolution of adoption, certified copy from their clerk.
We have that in one case, I know of possibly two. So then, what, there's no action required from the board? It's just
As long as they-
handled through land services?
Right, we would have, obviously, if we make the change in our ordinance, because it's through the public health, and then if we get notice of that, and land services has that, we would have to get that, and then they would not be issued a license from us. But we would have to see that in writing
Yeah.
from each jurisdiction.
But nobody has it yet.
We haven't seen anything, I think maybe.
A clerk could say, we don't want any short-term rentals unless you have it's certified or whatever you want to call it. Okay.
So the onus is going to be on whatever jurisdiction. So I believe Ironton may have passed something, but I don't know if we've actually seen a copy of that.
You know, we've heard of, I've heard tell through the grapevine of some of the townships not wanting them, in particular in your area.
Right.
We probably, if you adopt this, I think we still have to follow back through with them to cross the T, if you will. We need you to show us, and once they show us, we would not issue a license. We might get sued because we don't issue a license. That's a possibility.
Or we might get sued because we do issue a license.
Mr. Chair, if I might ask, what's the current term of a license?
It's annual, so it expires every year, calendar year.
So if they passed it tonight, and I have a short-term rental in their jurisdiction, and they don't want it, I would have until the expiration of that license to operate, correct?
I would
resolution.
consult our attorney's office first.
I think it's going to depend on what the ordinance within that jurisdiction says. You know, we operate within the public health realm, and that is how the ordinance was passed, was within our power within the community, within public health. At this point, no other jurisdiction within Crow Wing County has any control or any duties within the Department of Health. We are the only agency or jurisdiction that has that. I would have to do some more research, but if they were to pass it immediately, I do question whether the effective date wouldn't be until January 1st.
But
When our
what if
license
I was just
expires.
issued a license for a year, which would be next August?
No, we issue calendar year, so
Okay.
ours goes from January 1 through December
Okay.
31.
So-
So whether, because a license was already issued,
They'd be allowed to
Because-
probably operate until the end of
Correct.
December, and then I'd have to cancel any reservations going forward.
right, because our license would issue January 1. So because no action had been taken prior to that, but I can't speak for that specifically. I would have to do a little bit more research.
Typical lawyer speak.
We would have to notify people that they are in a jurisdiction that has passed a new law that prohibits short-term rentals, and that we will not be able to renew their license.
So I guess I thought I heard from somebody that Breezy Point, for example, has, do they have their own short-term rental? Bill?
They just did.
Okay, so what does that mean then? Do they still get a license from us, or do they get a license from them?
Yes.
Yes, both?
We could use our land use authority here if you did not want our ordinance to apply within city limits and leave cities to do their own zoning, which we have no authority there. Then our short-term rental ordinance would only apply in areas where it is township government and they have not chosen to do their own planning and zoning. So Crow Wing, Ironton, if we used our public health authority, our ordinance would not apply there.
So they have to get a double license in Breezy Point?
Well, it depends on what Breezy Point's ordinance says. Maybe Breezy Point just has use definitions, but no permit required. I don't know.
I'd have to look and see, I haven't seen it.
But they can't be less restrictive, they can be more restrictive. Okay,
Correct.
okay.
They're using their land use authority, we're using our public health authority. If we change and use our land use authority, you know how land use works, doesn't apply in the city limits,
Right.
and it only applies in the township areas where they aren't doing their own zoning. So we could draw from that, that would automatically carve every city out of this.
But we got to remember that the cities originally asked us for their help.
That is correct.
They didn't ask me, though. They asked you, apparently.
So we have no cities that have submitted a resolution stating they do not want short-term rentals.
I
Not that I'm
haven't heard
aware
that
of.
from anyone. Have you?
No. I'm not aware of any resolutions or any ordinance changes.
Other than, we hear tell.
Right. And
Well,
our
I've heard
office
about.
actually called Ironton because we saw on the internet that there was a specific on their website that said the city of Ironton has passed a resolution that they will ban short-term rentals. My legal assistant called twice, left messages asking for a copy. We've never received a call back, and we've never received a copy.
I thought I seen a email with that copy of that resolution, I thought maybe sent to Jessica, but from councilperson Hamdorf.
We would circle back either way.
Either
just
way,
to make
yeah.
sure that we have it and that they have it.
Yeah, okay, because I just
I'm
assumed
aware
that
of
was
that one and then I think Cuyuna too.
Cuyuna, which has been adamant for over a year, and we've got nothing from them.
They do not, excuse me, Chair Hoag, I have not seen anything that specifies that they ban short-term rentals in their ordinances.
Okay.
And it would have to specifically say that they ban short-term rentals because this is a public health ordinance. And Cuyuna does not have any public health authority.
Okay.
So this is what we came up with to try to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. Laws are blunt instruments sometimes, and it's the opposite of what we were trying to do, but it's what we can do. Opt out
Well,
instead of opt in.
I think we need that opt-out as part of the ordinance for these cities that don't want it, but then they got to follow through and get us the documents that we need to do that. So I'll have a discussion with both those cities because they.
That's your area. Why would Ironton or Cuyuna, why would they not want to have any vacation rentals? I remember when I was in the legislature, I helped get money to start the mountain biking trails, and Crosby has just blossomed into a destination for people. If there's no place to stay there, where are they going to go?
I can't answer that.
Welcome to Crosby, but you can't stay here.
Baxter will take them.
Yeah, exactly. So why, are we changing the ordinance? What's the plan here?
It's for your consideration. This is what we've heard from smatterings of you.
But I
And
thought,
so we're putting it forward for your
So
consideration.
there's two changes here.
There's more. You can see every underline, and so like in 4.1A, the full name, first, middle, last, date of birth. That's a change, but I didn't think that was the substance you wanted to sink your teeth into. So we're happy to talk about any of the underlined provisions, but the two that we thought had most substance were the ones that I pointed out. Happy to talk about any of them, though.
so if the board agrees with this, then what would be the process then?
We have to provide a notice of intent to enact. I would want to get direction from you. Do you want to use a 30-day public comment period? I would suggest you do, because we're talking about licenses that aren't going to be issued till January anyway, so we got time. Do a notice of intent to enact, 30-day public comment period, put it on your agenda with a public hearing, and you guys do the voodoo you
Okay,
do.
you just answered my question. Because I thought anytime we're not required, when we have an ordinance change, to have a public hearing, but we always have had one.
We are required.
We are
If we
required.
make an ordinance change.
Okay.
Now, we can use we use a 30-day public comment period.
Yes.
And I think it has a lot of benefits to it, but it slows it down could go a little quicker, but in this particular instance, since whatever we do isn't going to get effective until the first of the year anyway.
So are we required to have a 30-day public comment
No,
period?
you could just hold a public hearing, and that would shorten it by, so you see, it could shorten the time frame by
You have to have 10 days' notice.
10 days' notice.
By
so 20
statute, we
days
have
would
to
be-
have a public hearing. So why would, this is, I'm talking broadly about everything, why do we take public comment like that?
I think it has good reason. One, it allows people who are working, you hear this thrown at us, it allows people who are working to still participate in the process. Two, it allows everybody who is participating in the process to see what everybody else is saying, where submitted through a public hearing, it just washes over you on that day. And so I think it's more transparent. And to be honest with you, I think it has sort of forced people to put pen to paper and be thoughtful about what they say.
But so
think it
is
has
that for the benefit of the board then? Because I feel like we're all elected, and the reason why we're elected is to make these decisions. So is that just to gather more information for our thoughtful decision, I guess?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. I think it gives you better information.
Uh-oh.
Point of clarification, we do have a signed resolution from the city of Ironton that restricts short-term rentals in that city, just to make sure everybody does know that.
Okay, thank you. I'm not losing my mind then.
And that's where I say who they sent it to may be any of a variety of people because we're not accepting them per se. So when we formally reach out, then, you know, we need to make sure we get the formal one, that it is a certified copy, you know, those kinds of things. So we will circle back even to them.
Okay. Well, what are you looking to learn out of this?
Do you want this to move forward, or do you want us to put it back in the ash can?
I would like to see it move forward just because I think our first attempt at this was kind of just a generic, let's get something going, but now that we're, how many, a year, 2 years into this?
It'll be 2 years at the end of this year.
I would just like to give the people opportunity to tell us their stories, whether they're pro short-term rental or anti, and at least get a couple of these changes built into it. But public, a 30-day, I think, is fair to the people. That's my thoughts.
I could see taking the occupancy back down to, at least instead of 4+1, just to 4.
So throw the baby out.
Yep. Yep.
Any other interest in changing the number of bedrooms?
What's the number?
Well, I think I was going to say 3+1, but we're still arriving at the same end result.
Yeah.
Depends on the number of bedrooms.
Gary and I had an opportunity to visit a vacation rental.
3 bedrooms, 4 per bedroom plus 1. So 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. 3 times 3 per bedroom plus 1, that's 9, plus 1 is 10.
Oh, well, then I'd just say to 3, but.
So
What's up with the +1? What's that all about?
I think it's usually from isn't that from 70, 80?
It is not from 70, 80. I think we drew that from other short-term rental ordinances. Now, the next question is, why did they do it? I'm not sure if there was a cry from the public in that area saying, a lot of times we like to have one more that comes over. It just, I don't have a very specific, concrete rule on that one. Unless Gary has some, do you have?
No, it was trying to balance what we could actually enforce and what we couldn't. The more you get restrictive on that, the more people are going to count, and we're going to get more phone calls that are over occupancy. There's no right or wrong there. We were just taking a stab at where the sweet spot was, I guess. And that was based on the evidence of the majority of septics not failing, So, but I'll tell you, the 4+1, the biggest problem, it isn't the septic, it's noise, it's the nuisance complaints. too big of parties for some of those properties. That's the feedback we've gotten. I'm not saying right, wrong, or whatever, but that's where that comes into play probably more than anything.
I was going to share, Gary and I went to a vacation rental. What did they have, 5 full-size beds in one room?
Yeah.
They were all tiered up. It was crazy. He made them take some out. He was tough.
What, and I'm thinking out loud, but what, to Commissioner Coring's point, what if the ordinance was such that cities that do have the water and sewer systems, you could keep it 4, and those that are outside of I guess operating off a septic have 3? Is that a nightmare?
I don't believe that's a nightmare.
Again, just trying to think.
Sure. Yeah, where those sweet spots lie.
Right.
I understand, yeah.
What really, I'm asking you, so what really prompted this? Was it just, is it septic compliance, or is it what Gary just said, it's big parties and
What, for the vacation rentals?
yeah.
Really what started that, and we got to remember, it's really the health department. If the health department would do their job at the state level, they would be supervising these.
Okay.
And nobody was supervising it. So that came to it. So, and I got a number of calls from Monpa Resorts who were feeling that it was not a level playing field. Then we decided to call a meeting with the cities and townships and said, what do you want to do? This is the state's responsibility to oversee vacation rentals. And they were asking, what should we do? Because they either had to do their own, or they looked at the county to saying, they asked us if we would take responsibility to try to do a short-term vacation rental for the county. And so that's what we did. And so it was really coming from the resorts, and it was coming from the cities and townships.
But to me, it seems like the resorts, they're just mad because it's taking business away from them, and then you put the squeeze on short-term rentals, and these people think that they're going to come back to the resorts. I don't know if I believe that.
Well, I don't think that, I think we need vacation rentals. We don't want to limit them. You know, we need them because they fill a void of the resorts that have closed and doing that. The resorts that are doing it are just saying, we just want a level playing field. You know, we want, if we're having to pay these taxes and doing this, then those are people that are in the hospitality industry, because it's an industry, should be also having and paying their fair share. So our approach was, who's doing it was the big part, and are they paying taxes?
I mentioned this to Gary, that that I believe in the city of Minneapolis, they have an ordinance, but if you live on the property and you have a short-term rental, they don't require a license, because that's what it was, is you're monitoring whether things are out of control.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they have a tax base of bed and breakfast, and a lot of times bed and breakfasts, the owner manager is there. And that's, I think, why they decided to tax short-term vacation rentals the same as basically a bed and breakfast.
Gary.
Yeah, I'll just say that 2 years of almost having this in effect, the unsung, you can say, beauty of this ordinance is putting the onus on the property owner. You didn't take their property right away from them. Nobody said you can't. There isn't. You can if you follow these extra rules. And I don't know how many, Jake, I know we don't have it in front of us, the actual substantiated complaints that we've gotten this year, they're all resolved but 2. And so before we had this ordinance, you would still have a laundry list of frustrated people with no resolve probably, other than they called the sheriff and hopefully the party got quieted down. But just the public's knowledge of the septic is being checked, I think, is a great benefit. That's what we hear from the public, you know. That's not my opinion. We hear that. They like that is going on. Because whether it's at 95% compliant or 30%, there is a fear that our public waters, our drinking waters are getting, polluted from these. And so I think there's some really good unsung kind of things that go on with this ordinance that the public really appreciates. That's what we hear, but I just wanted to share, if you weren't thinking along some of those lines too, that having the owner of the property be responsible for the people they rent to is probably a really good thing. But I don't know. That's what you guys get,
the big bucks for to decide.
So what do you need?
I heard a consensus around 2.3, the jurisdiction question.
Yeah.
I've not yet heard a consensus on changing the number of bedrooms.
And is there any other data you guys would like if we brought this back for that public hearing to present, like number of compliance inspections and how many actual failed? How many actual complaints might be inform your decision on the nuisance stuff, maybe? Is there any, would you like that more summarized and formalized for your decision? Or is there any other things you would like? Or it could just be 3.
Well, I think if you supplied us with the number of complaints, you know, how many strike 3s are out there, that type of stuff, that we could.
What? Strike.
The strike 3 rule that were, I know I just worked with Jake a little bit on one that was a cease and desist operation. So just maybe more of that type of information. What, of the 30 complaints, what are they all for?
Sure.
Just
we can do that.
So, but you were looking for feedback on the number per bedroom, right? And I voiced mine of 3. I don't know what the others feel.
Rule 7080 says 2. I think we should follow the rules.
So 2? 3?
I could support 3. I think 2 is pretty restrictive for a rental property.
Is it 3 plus 1 or just 3?
3 plus 1, yeah.
Okay, I could support that.
It's, I think, at least a step in the right direction to possibly eliminate some issues, but likely won't. How many you want?
I was wondering if you were going to ask me.
Huh?
8 plus
8?
1.
8 plus 1, all right. Next.
Next.
So I don't know where we're at.
I think we're going to put 3 plus 1 in the draft, and then you guys can nod on it and whatever you choose to do. But we'll highlight 3 plus 1 in the draft. Okay? We'll move it forward, notice of intent, public hearing, public comment period.
Good.
Okay? Mr. Chair, I think that's all we have today.
Thank you. I'll reach